Holy cow. Well, all the coaches in the NFL that have been fired, a lot aren't surprising. There really wasn't a big surprise on Black Monday. But then you go into Tuesday and there is a big surprise that I don't think anybody really saw coming. I didn't see it really coming, and being a head coach in any sport, whether it be NFL, NBA, Major League Baseball, is very tough. No matter what sport it is, it's very tough, and your job is never secure. There's always that possibility that you could get fired. And long tenured coaches, what I mean by long tenured, I mean like 10 plus years, is becoming almost a lost art. It really is, because you're hearing it less and less as the years go by, because you're not going to hear people like Coach K being a coach of the same team for 25 plus years. It's becoming an anomaly. It's becoming very rare in and of itself. And what, just a cow? What am I talking about? Well, I have to get the Harbaugh right, because there's a couple Harbaughs. They're brothers, John and Jim Harbaugh. John Harbaugh of the Ravens, who had been a coach there since 2008. He was one of the longest tenured coaches in the NFL. You have Andy Reid from the Chiefs, who's been there since 2013, and he did have a very bad year, but at 6-11, I think you really don't know, because being a coach can be fickle, and it always depends what have you done for me lately. But I think his job is secure. I really haven't heard much on that front if he's going to get fired. So I think Andy Reid's, maybe secure. And then there's, yes, Mike Tomlin. He's the longest tenured head coach in the NFL. And he's been with the Steelers since 2007. And Mike Tomlin's an interesting one. It's very interesting. He's never had a losing season, which is incredibly hard to do in the NFL, because you're going to have your up and down years. Look at Andy Reid, but the Steelers are in the playoffs, and there is rumors and speculation as if Mike Tomlin's going to come back next year. He's thinking about retiring or resigning, whichever you want to say. Now, back to John Harbaugh. He was very, very successful with the Ravens. You have to be very successful to have a tenure that long, 18 years. And that says a lot, because John Harbaugh did have other offers. Don't kid yourself. He had other offers, but he was very loyal to the Ravens organization. And I don't think the feeling was actually mutual with the Ravens. But I think 18 years is a long time. And I don't get the firing. I don't get it. It really, there's something missing here. They were one kick away from being in the playoffs. The one field goal miss against the Steelers. This doesn't add up. They went 8-9. Okay, that's not one of his worst records he's had with the Ravens. He had one prior, I think, like right after the Super Bowl, like 5-11 or something like that. So it's not his worst record he's had at the Ravens, but it just seems like there's a missing part of the story here that I'm not getting. I looked, and I don't see why they fired him when this was his first time missing the playoffs since 2021. So he's been in the playoffs recently. I could make more sense of this if Harbaugh had missed the playoffs for a couple or three different seasons. This doesn't make a lot of sense. So then I go, well, then maybe it's his age. No, he's only 63. He's not as old as Pete Carroll, who was recently fired from the Raiders, who's 74. So Harbaugh's only 63. I'm thinking, no, it can't be the age thing. I don't think it can be. And I think Harbaugh could end up coaching somewhere else. No question about it, because he's going to be a hot commodity on the market. That once they see Harbaugh's on the market, they're going to want to interview him because he brings a great coaching pedigree to the table. Former Super Bowl champion, very successful in the playoffs, very successful in the regular season. He knows how to get the best out of his players, and this is a firing that doesn't make a lot of sense. Is some team that needs a coach will probably, because there's a lot of them, there's the Arizona Cardinals, there's the Las Vegas Raiders, there's the Atlanta Falcons. There is some teams that need a coach. They would need a coach like Harbaugh to lead them to the promised land. And I think whoever lands Harbaugh is going to be getting a great coach, and maybe they can turn around their franchise. I don't think he would rush into it, but I think he's going to go look at the situation, because he's a very intelligent man. Don't kid yourself. The Harbaugh brothers are very intelligent, and I think he's going to land somewhere. I wouldn't be surprised if by the end of the off season that he's coaching somewhere else, because he's going to land somewhere else. I don't think he's going to be unemployed too long, because there's no question about it. He's a great coach. And remember, that leaves two coaches that are long-tenured coaches. Mike Tomlin probably going to resign or retire at the end of the season. That's the speculation. I think Andy Reid's job is pretty safe, but you never know. It's a what have you done for me lately business. What, just a cow? Oh, yeah, I know you're over there, and pretty girl's here. She's snoozing away, and I tried to talk to her about my next topic. She fell asleep on it. That's how much she does not want to talk about. Oh, God. I feel like I'm piling it on talking about the Cowboys. I don't want to. It's just... Okay, so the Cowboys went ahead and fired their defensive coordinator, Matt Fluss, or however you say his name, because they were at the bottom of the rung. They were in the worst of the worst of defensive stats. You can name a stat, and they were towards the bottom. I mean, a high school team could have beat that defense this year. They were bad. And by the way, that was their fourth defensive coordinator in 4 years. That's how bad the Cowboys defense has been, not just this year, but in the previous 4 years. So they're going to be looking at another defensive coordinator, and oh boy. And Jerry Jones, how many owners have their own press conference? Yeah. End of the season press conference. How many owners can you name that has their own press conference like it's a movie studio, like he's announcing the next great big sequel? It's unbelievable. And Jerry Jones, I'm sorry, he's 83. The game has clearly passed him by. He's been trying to build a Super Bowl championship contender for 30 years. Yes. This marked the 30th anniversary, this month will be, since their last Super Bowl. 30 years. Do you realize how many teams have been to the Super Bowl, whether they won or lost, doesn't matter, since their last Super Bowl? The Patriots hadn't even, they won the Super Bowl, but they hadn't won any. They ended up winning a lot of Super Bowls. They won 10 times more Super Bowls than the Cowboys have in 30 years. Oh boy. So, Jerry Jones holding his end of season press conference. He's finally going to retire. Not really, but hey, I think Cowboy fans would probably rejoice. It was like when Jerry Jones became the owner and he ended up firing Tom Landry. Fans actually rejoiced because of a 1-15 season, but okay, I digress. That's ancient history. But, okay, you know what? Just a cow. I've made it a goal of mine not to talk politics. So, Jerry Jones being so out of touch compares finding a new defensive coordinator to Venezuela. I don't talk politics, and I'm not going to get into the politics side of it, but how can you compare Cowboys to a small country? I don't know. I don't know how you could even do that. That's pretty pretty poor choice of words from Jerry himself. Yeah, Jerry World. You know what? I don't want to even get into it. Do you, pretty girl? See, you don't want to even talk about it either. What do you think about Jerry Jones saying that time he retires, he wants to end up with more Super Bowls wins than any other coach? Yeah, he's not going to do that. They'd have to go on a dynasty run of all dynasty runs and to make sure Jerry Jones is on life support when he's getting ready to die. Because Jerry Jones only has 3 Super Bowls. 3. Jerry Kraft of the New England Patriots has how many? 6? 7? Something like that. He has quite a bit. The entire Rooney family, because they own the Steelers and all that, the entire Rooney family has more Super Bowls than Jerry Jones. Jerry Jones is not going to reach that goal. He probably won't even get to see the Super Bowl, see the Cowboys win another Super Bowl. Jerry Jones, like I've said, is 83. And on my Why Did It Fail series with the Cowboys, I talked about Jerry Jones. I keep talking about him, and quite frankly, I'm sick of talking about him. I just hope he doesn't croak tomorrow, because then I'm going to have to find something good to talk about with Jerry Jones, because it's unfortunate. He's starting to remind me of Al Davis when he was still alive and he was still the owner of the Raiders. You could see his decline, his mental declining, and it became really sad when he was trying to build a championship caliber team with the Raiders that never actually transpired. He kept hiring awful coaches. He kept hiring awful defensive and offensive coordinators. He kept making horrible draft choices, kept signing the wrong players. Does this all sound familiar? This is Jerry Jones in essence, just like Al Davis, the same thing. And year in and year out, we have to hear the excuses from Jerry Jones himself. The game has passed him by. It clearly has. There's no question about it. The game has passed him by. What owner, I pose this question again, what owner has their own press conference at the end of the season? The Chiefs didn't even do that. Their owner didn't. She's stretching. And she don't want to even talk. Look, see, I'm telling you, what do you think? I know, just a cow. I usually have you back on the back of the chair, but all right. See, I can't put him back here because Pretty Girl won't like it. See? She didn't like that. So I can't put him there because of the cat. And the cat says, let's end the talk about the Cowboys. I agree. Hopefully I don't have to talk about them for a while because I'm sick of talking about Jerry Jones and the damn Cowboys. Well, it seems like it's not ending. It's not ending with the firings. There's so many, I've lost track how many there is. And we got a new one. Mike McDaniel of the Dolphins. What, just a cow? It's a good question. Is he a good coach? Or is he a good coach with bad luck? Or is he a bad coach with really bad luck? I don't know. That is a good question because when you look at Mike McDaniel's tenure, his most successful season was 2023, where he went 11-6. So then you look at his other seasons, and it's a little bit of a mess. 2022, they started 8-3, and then they lost 5 in a row, and then they beat the Jets in the regular season finale to barely make the playoffs. Okay, so then we talked about 2023, and then there's 2024. They started 2-6, and then they ended up rebounding and finished 8-9. This is what I mean: good coach with bad luck, or bad coach with extremely bad luck. And then this year, 2025, started again another bad start. 1-6, and then he ended up finishing, bouncing back and finishing 7-10. Is it entirely his fault? Well, he is the head coach, so they do have to blame somebody. No, I don't think it's entirely his fault because there's a big controversy in Miami, the Dolphins, of course. There's a big controversy. It's Tua. I'm not going to try to pronounce his last name. Is he a good quarterback with bad luck, or is he a bad quarterback with bad luck? I mean, I don't know. I think he's a okay quarterback. I don't think he's an elite quarterback. But you see, he's had at least how many concussions, just a cow? Yeah, at least 4 concussions. Maybe more, because there's rumors and speculations that he probably hasn't reported on every concussion. He's got this style that doesn't mesh well with the NFL, where he's a little bit of a reckless quarterback, and he's always getting concussions, and this is a problem. I know I'm talking about Tua, and this is supposed to be about McDaniel, but it's sort of intertwined. Because would the Dolphins have been this bad with Tua in the lineup, or would they have been? Because you don't know. And they had that one season which was great at 11-6, and then the other sort of ho-hum. And yeah, McDaniel's an interesting choice, interesting coach, because he's probably going to land somewhere else, more than likely, because he did. At least for one season, he was a good coach. The others, they had a hot start, and then they cooled off, and they've had cold starts, and they got hot towards the middle and the end of the regular season. Yeah, that was a problem with the Dolphins. It seemed like they just couldn't be consistent on one basis. It was either a hot start, cold, or a cold start and got hot. It was just a weird dynamic with the Dolphins. It was like watching Jekyll and Hyde. It really was, because you never knew which version of the Dolphins you were going to get. And I think McDaniel was in a bad position. It's sort of like Raheem Morris at Atlanta Falcons. No matter what they did, they weren't going to succeed, and especially with Tua. I know this cow. I keep going back to that. Are the Dolphins going to keep Tua? Who knows? We'll have to see what happens in the offseason. What, just a cow? Yes. We're going to shift gears. Instead of talking about all the NFL firings, we're going to talk about the NCAA football playoffs. And I think overall, It's been successful. I really do. I think the playoffs has created some excitement. They've only had it for a couple years, but I think it's done pretty well. And I think you get a clear-cut national championship game winner. I really do. I don't think there's a lot of controversy with it like there is with NASCAR, because they're going to be having a statement Monday, which I may go over next week, talking about what NASCAR has decided to do with their controversial point system. But that notwithstanding, let's talk about the college football playoffs. Miami beat Ole Miss 31-27, so they will be facing Indiana, who rolled over Oregon. It was never close, 56-22. And this is the most interesting championship game I can remember in recent times, especially in NCAA football, because it seems like every year it was the same teams. The Michigans, the Ohio States, the Georgias, the Alabamas, whatever have you. It was always the same team, the same dominant teams that were there year in and year out. And it's nice to get a different one, at least for one season. It was just such a breath of fresh air, because you have Miami, who, Miami has a history. They have a storied history. I mean, you could talk about all their championships. You could talk about all their Heisman Trophy winners. I mean, Miami, there are so many players that have went through the U that have went on to Hall of Fame careers. I mean, you could just literally do a video talking about that all freaking day, because Miami, the U, has a storied history. And they came and they were dominant in the 80s, 90s, early 2000s. They started to fall off, and they went on hard times, a lot of sanctions. And whoever took over the program was going to have to build them from the ground up. And that's what Mario Cristobal has done. He's been there for 4 years, and he's had to build them back up. He had a 5-7 season, 7-5, and then 10-3. And this year, region national championship game, 13-2. So and they're finally bringing back their dominance that they had, and when they were the top of the game, when they were the best team in the land in the 80s and 90s. And then there's Indiana. What? Yeah, Indiana, when you think of Indiana, you don't think of their football program. That's the furthest thing from your mind. When you say, Indiana, it's sort of like Duke, North Carolina. You do not, under any conditions, think of their football program. You immediately go, oh, yes, the basketball, Indiana. You think of Bob Knight, him throwing chairs in national championship games, and just having players of the year. And Indiana basketball is what you remember. You don't remember the football program. The football program for 100 years, at least 100 years, has been an afterthought. Indiana's had some of the worst possible teams that you can think of, because they're not known for their football. Football was a complete afterthought, because you got to think of this. Indiana has had zero 10-win seasons in over 100 years. I think the closest they got was like the 8 or 9. And there was a couple years where they had good years here and there, but nothing really consistent. Nothing really too consistent. And when Kurt Cogniti took over this program, unlike when Cristobal took over Miami, there was high expectations. When Kurt took over this program, Indiana, there was not high expectations for them to be a championship contender, because it's Indiana, for God's sakes. It's Indiana, a school that nobody wants to take a job for. Nobody, like the Browns in the NFL. And nobody wants to take that job. And in 2 years, 11-2 and 15-0, 26 wins. You gotta put this in perspective. 26 wins. in 2 seasons, you could probably take 10 or the last 10 or 12 years before he took over, and you wouldn't even get close to the combined number of wins Indiana has had. That is putting it into perspective. It really, really is, because Indiana is not, it's never been known as a powerhouse team. And I am looking forward to the national championship game. I want to see a first-time national championship, Indiana. I'm really not polling for anybody, but if I was, I'd be polling for Indiana because I lived in Fort Wayne, so I do have some Indiana ties. So I am polling for Indiana, but then there's Miami. You want to see them come back to their yesterday heyday, but I would rather like to have Indiana win. Will they? Who knows? Who knows what will happen in the national championship game? But you know what? It's an interesting championship game to say the very least. It's something different, mostly, than you're used to seeing in the last 10 years. Because in the last 10 years, it's been the same tired old teams dominating. And this year, we got something different. At least I think so.
Me and Mom are saying that's all for now.
That's all for now.